My name is Emma, and for almost 2 years, I saved every extra dollar I could for one person. My younger sister, Lily. I wasn't rich. I didn't have a huge salary or a perfect life. But Lily was my little sister, and I wanted her to have a chance at the future she'd always talked about. So I saved. I skipped expensive dinners. I stopped buying things I didn't need. Whenever I received overtime pay or a bonus, I moved part of it into a separate savings account. Every month, I watched that number grow. $3,000, $7,000, $11,000, and eventually $15,950. That was the amount I had managed to save for Lily's tuition. She knew about the money, Dad knew, and Lily had promised me more than once that she'd make good use of it. Then, one Friday afternoon, everything changed. I came home from work and immediately noticed 3 expensive shopping bags sitting on our living room floor. Lily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I looked at the bags, then at her. "What's all that?" She barely looked up. "Just some stuff." I picked up one of the bags. The store logo alone made my stomach hurt. "Some stuff?" She shrugged. "Clothes, makeup, a few other things." I stared at her. "Lily, where did you get the money?" She went quiet. That silence told me something was wrong. I walked toward her. "How much did you spend?" "Why do you care?" "Because you told me you still needed money for tuition." She rolled her eyes. "Emma, please don't start." "I haven't started anything. I'm asking a question." She looked at me, and then she smiled. It wasn't an apologetic smile. It was almost confident. "I used some of the money." My stomach dropped. "What money?" She looked directly at me. "The money you saved." I froze. "You mean the tuition money?" She nodded. "Yes." "How?" "I transferred it." "You transferred my savings?" "Our savings." "No, Lily, they were my savings. They were for me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "How much?" She looked away. "Most of it." "Most isn't a number," she sighed. "About 12,000. For a moment, I couldn't speak. $12,000. Gone. I opened my laptop and logged into the account. The balance was almost empty. I stared at the screen. 2 years of sacrifice, gone in minutes. Lily watched me, and I expected her to apologize. Instead, she said, "You're making this way bigger than it needs to be." I slowly closed the laptop. "Okay," she frowned. "That's it?" I looked at her. "No," I stood up. "That's all I'm saying right now." She laughed. "Emma, seriously, it's fine." I grabbed my keys. "Sure." As I walked away, she called after me. "Where are you going?" I stopped, then turned around. "I'm going to figure out why you needed $12,000. Her expression changed, just for a second. But I saw it. Fear. And that's when I knew the shopping wasn't the real story. That night, I barely slept. Around midnight, I heard the front door open. I got out of bed and quietly walked downstairs. Through the window, I saw Lily getting into a black sedan. Someone was waiting for her. The car drove away. I stood there staring into the darkness. Lily had never mentioned a black sedan. She had never mentioned anyone picking her up, and she certainly hadn't mentioned where she was going. The next morning, Dad came downstairs. He poured himself coffee and checked his phone. Then he looked at me. "Emma? Yeah? Did you transfer Lily's tuition money?" I stared at him. "No." His face changed. "Then why did Lily tell me there was a problem with the account?" I immediately understood. She hadn't just hidden it from me. She had lied to Dad, too. I told him everything. Dad was furious. When Lily finally came downstairs, he confronted her. "Where is the $15,950? She froze. Then she whispered, "I can explain." Dad folded his arms. "Then explain." She looked at me, then at Dad, and finally said, "I wasn't going to college anymore." Silence. Dad stared at her. "Since when?" 3 months. 3 months? He looked at me. You've known this for 3 months? I nodded. Apparently. Lily started crying. I was going to fix everything. I looked at her. What exactly were you fixing? She hesitated. Then she finally told us. 3 months earlier, she'd met someone online. A man who claimed he could help her make money through investments. At first, she'd sent him $500. He returned $1,000. So she trusted him. Then she sent $4,000, then more. When the money disappeared, he told her she needed to send additional money to unlock her account. And Lily kept paying, until almost all of my savings were gone. Dad stared at her. You gave thousands of dollars to someone you barely knew? Lily cried. I thought I could get it back. I sat quietly. I was angry. But now I understood something. She hadn't stolen the money because she wanted expensive clothes. She had been trying to recover money she'd already lost. That didn't excuse what she did, but it explained it. I asked, well, what's his name? Ryan. Real name? I don't know. That answer made my blood run cold. I took Lily's phone. I started going through the messages. At first, everything looked normal. Then I found one message. If you tell your family, you'll lose everything. Another. Your sister won't know until it's too late. I looked at Lily. How does he know about me? She started crying again. I told him. What did you tell him? That you were helping me with tuition. How much? She looked down. I told him the amount. I felt sick. Then I noticed something even stranger. There were several large transfers, not to Ryan, to another account. I showed Dad. The account belonged to a company called M. Carter Consulting. Dad stared at the name. His face went pale. What's wrong? He didn't answer immediately. Then he whispered, That belongs to your Uncle Mark. I looked at him. Uncle Mark? Dad nodded. Your mother's brother. I stared at the account. Lily shook her head. I didn't know. Dad immediately called Mark, but Mark didn't answer. Instead, Lily's phone buzzed. A new message. You shouldn't have shown them the account. I looked at Lily, then another message arrived. Now the house becomes the next step. My heart stopped. What house? Dad looked at me. His expression had completely changed. The house your mother left you. I stared at him. My mother left me a house? Dad went silent. And suddenly, I realized this was much bigger than stolen tuition money. Someone hadn't just been trying to take Lily's money. Someone had been trying to get close to me. And somehow, they knew about something my mother had left behind. Something I'd never even known existed. I stared at Dad. The house my mother left me? He nodded slowly. Yes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother never left me a house. She did. Then why have I never heard about it? Dad looked uncomfortable. Because your mother wanted you to know when you were older. I shook my head. I am older. I know. Then why didn't you tell me? He didn't answer. That silence made me even more suspicious. I looked at Lily. She was sitting quietly on the couch, staring at the floor. I asked her, Did Ryan know about the house? She shook her head. I never told him. Then how did he know? I don't know. Dad immediately took Lily's phone. Show me every message. We went through them together. There were dozens. Ryan had asked Lily questions about our family, where Dad worked, where I worked, whether we owned property, whether I had savings. At the time, Lily had thought he was simply getting to know her. Now it looked completely different. He had been collecting information. Then I found a message from 2 months earlier. Ryan had written, Your sister doesn't know what she's sitting on. I stared at it. What does that mean? Lily shook her head. I don't know. I turned to Dad. You need to tell me everything about this house. Dad sighed. Your mother bought it before you were born. Where is it? About 40 minutes outside the city. Who lives there now? Nobody. Then why have I never seen it? Because your mother didn't want you going there. Why? Dad looked away. She believed someone was watching the property. I felt a chill. Who? We never knew. Then why did she leave it to me? Because she trusted you. I stared at him. That's not enough, Dad. I know. He sat down. After your mother died, I was supposed to tell you about the house when you turned 25. I frowned. Why 25? Because that's when the trust became active. What trust? Dad looked at me. The house isn't directly in your name. I waited. It's held in a family trust. I couldn't speak. Everything suddenly felt unreal. The money, Lily, Ryan, the house, the trust. It was all connected somehow. I asked, who else knows about this trust? Dad hesitated. Your Uncle Mark. I immediately thought about the account. Monsieur Carter Consulting. Dad nodded. That was Mark's business. Was? He closed that office years ago. I looked at Lily. Then why is money going there now? Dad didn't know. We decided to contact the bank and report the transfers. But before we could do that, Dad's phone rang. It was Mark. Dad answered. Where are you? Mark sounded nervous. I'm out of town. Why? I had to leave. Dad looked at me. Mark, what's going on? There was a long pause, then Mark said, Did Emma find out about the house? Dad froze. I immediately stepped closer. How does he know? I whispered. Dad put the phone on speaker. Mark continued. Listen to me carefully. Don't go to the house. I asked, why? Because it's not safe. Who is after us? I don't know. You're lying. Mark became quiet, then he said, I've been trying to protect you. By taking Lily's money. I didn't take anything. But the account is yours. Someone is using my company. Who? I don't know. I could hear panic in his voice. Then he said, Emma, your mother discovered something before she died. I froze. What? I can't tell you over the phone. Then tell me in person. I can't. Why? Because if they're listening... He stopped. Dad asked, Who's they? Mark whispered, People who have been waiting for Emma to turn 25. The call ended. I stared at the phone. What does my age have to do with this? Dad didn't answer. I suddenly felt angry. Everyone knows something except me. Emma! No. I stood up. My entire life, everyone has been deciding what I should and shouldn't know. Dad looked hurt. I was trying to protect you. Maybe. I grabbed my jacket. But I'm done being protected. Where are you going? To the house. Dad immediately stood. No. I need answers. We don't know who's watching it. Then we take precautions. Dad sighed. Eventually he agreed to come with me. Lily wanted to come too, but Dad refused. Before we left, I copied all of Lily's messages onto a drive. If something happened, we wanted the evidence safe. The drive to the house was quiet. When we finally arrived, I immediately understood why Mom had kept me away. The property was beautiful, but it was isolated. Trees surrounded the house. There were no nearby neighbors. The front gate was slightly open. Dad stopped the car. I don't like this. Neither do I. We got out. The front door was locked. Dad checked the windows. Nothing. Then I noticed something. A small envelope had been placed beneath the doormat. My name was written across it. Emma. I looked at Dad. Did you put this here? No. I picked it up. Inside was a single photograph. It showed my mother standing in front of the house. She was holding me when I was a little girl. On the back was a handwritten sentence. Your mother knew exactly who would come looking for this house. I looked at Dad. Then I heard something behind us. A car engine. We turned. A black sedan was parked across the road. The same kind of car I'd seen Lily get into. The windows were tinted. I couldn't see the driver. Then the car slowly drove away. Dad grabbed my arm. Get inside. We rushed through the front door. Inside, everything was covered in dust. But one thing was different. A desk in the study had clearly been used recently. There were fresh papers on it. Dad picked one up. His face changed. What? He handed it to me. It was a copy of the family trust, and beside it was another document, a property transfer form. At the bottom was a signature, Dad's signature. I stared at it. Did you sign this? Dad looked horrified. No, but that's your signature. I never signed that. I looked at the date, 6 months earlier, exactly when Lily's mysterious investor had first appeared, and beneath Dad's signature was another name, Daniel Reeves. Dad whispered, "Your mother's old attorney." I looked at him. Then I think we just found the person who knows how all of this started. But before we could leave, my phone buzzed. A message from the unknown number. "You found the document," then another. "Now you'll understand why your mother was afraid." I stared at the screen. A third message appeared. "Look behind the painting." I slowly turned toward the wall. There was an old painting hanging above the desk. I walked toward it. Dad stood beside me. I lifted the frame. Behind it was a small hidden compartment. And inside was a sealed envelope with my mother's handwriting. My hands began to shake, because the first words on that envelope were, "Emma, if you're reading this, then they finally found you." My hands were shaking as I held the envelope. Dad stood beside me. "Open it," he whispered. I carefully tore it open. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was unmistakably my mother's. I hadn't seen it in years, but I recognized every curve of every letter. I began reading. "Emma, if you're reading this, then they finally found you." I stopped. Dad looked at me. I continued. "I don't know when you'll discover this. I only know that I couldn't risk telling you while you were young." My heart started pounding. The house is protected by the trust, but the trust isn't what they're after. I looked at Dad. "What does that mean?" He shook his head. "I don't know." I kept reading. "There is something hidden inside this house that could expose everything." I looked around the room. "What?" The letter continued. "Financial records, original agreements, names of people who used our family's identity without permission." Dad suddenly went pale. I looked at him. "You knew about this?" "No." "Then why are you acting like you do?" "Because your mother once told me she was afraid someone had been using her name." I looked back at the letter. There was more. "I trusted the wrong person." My heart skipped. The next sentence was underlined. "It was someone who had access to everything," Dad whispered. "Mark." I shook my head. "Maybe." Then I noticed something. At the bottom of the page were 3 initials. H.R. I frowned. "Who is H.R.? Dad looked at the initials. His face changed. "I don't know." "Dad, I honestly don't." I turned the page. There was a second sheet. This one contained a list of names. Mark, Daniel Reeves, and one name I didn't recognize. Helen Carter. I stared at it. "Who is Helen Carter?" Dad didn't answer. "Dad?" He looked at me. "She was your mother's closest friend." I felt a chill. "Helen?" "Yes." I remembered her. She had been around our family for years. She had comforted me after Mom died. She had visited Dad regularly, and she had even helped Lily find that so-called investment opportunity. I looked at Dad. "Did Helen know about the trust?" "Yes." "Did she know about the house?" "Yes." "Did she know about my savings?" "Yes." Suddenly, the whole situation became much clearer. I looked at the letter again. My mother had written, "The person who knows the most is the person you should trust the least." I swallowed. "Do you think it's Helen?" Dad didn't answer. Before we could continue, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. A message appeared. "You found her name." My heart stopped. I looked at Dad. Another message arrived. "Now ask yourself why she introduced Lily to Ryan." I froze. Dad grabbed the phone. "What does this mean?" I stared at the screen. Lily had once told me that a family friend had introduced her to Ryan. I'd never asked who. I called Lily immediately. She answered after a few rings. "Emma? Who introduced you to Ryan?" Silence. "Lily." She began crying. "I didn't want to tell you." "Who?" Helen. I closed my eyes. Dad looked at me. Helen introduced you? Yes. Why? She said Ryan could help me make money. Did she know about my tuition savings? Lily hesitated. Yes. My stomach dropped. How? I told her. You told Helen? Yes. When? Months ago. Dad whispered, This can't be a coincidence. I looked at the letter. My mother's handwriting suddenly seemed heavier. Helen knew about the trust. Helen knew about my savings. Helen introduced Lily to Ryan, and Helen had access to information about our family. But there was still one question. Why? Then I remembered the message. The house isn't the real prize. I looked at Dad. What if the house isn't what they want? He frowned. What else could be here? I looked around the study. My mother had hidden something valuable enough to make people wait years, something she believed could expose them. We searched every room. Nothing. Then I noticed the fireplace. There was a loose stone near the bottom. I pushed it. It moved. Behind it was a small metal box. Dad helped me pull it out. There was a keyhole. I tried the key I'd carried since childhood. It fit. The box opened. Inside was a flash drive and one photograph. The photograph showed my mother, Dad, Mark, Helen, and Daniel Reeves standing together. I looked at the date. It was taken less than a year before my mother died. I stared at Helen. Then I noticed something. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at my mother, and my mother was looking directly at her. There was something in Mom's expression. Fear. I turned the photograph over. There was a handwritten message. If you find this, don't trust the story they tell you about my death. My heart stopped. What? Dad took the photograph. He read the sentence. His hands began trembling. Emma. What? He looked at me. There was never supposed to be an investigation. I stared at him. What are you saying? He swallowed. Your mother didn't die believing everything was fine. The room went silent. She knew something was wrong, he continued. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I was scared. Of what? He looked at the flash drive. Of exactly what you're discovering now. I plugged the drive into the laptop. There was one folder. Inside was a single video. The file was named final_recording. I clicked it. My mother's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, scared, but determined. She stared directly into the camera. Emma. I felt tears fill my eyes. If you're watching this, then I failed to protect you from the truth. She paused. There are people who have been using our family for years. Dad leaned toward the screen. Mom continued. Mark isn't the person you should fear. I looked at Dad. He stared at the screen. Then Mom said the words that changed everything. The person behind this, she paused and looked directly into the camera, is someone you trust completely. The video suddenly ended. I stared at the black screen. Dad whispered, Who? I didn't know. But then my phone buzzed. A message appeared. Ask your father where he was the night your mother died. I slowly looked at Dad. He went completely silent, because for the first time, I realized there was a part of my mother's story that Dad had never told me. I stared at Dad. Where were you the night Mom died? He didn't answer. Not immediately, and that scared me more than anything. Dad? He slowly sat down. I was at the hospital. I frowned. That isn't what I asked. He looked at the floor. I wasn't with your mother when it happened. I felt my chest tighten. Then where were you? He took a long breath. She called me that night. Why? She said she had found something. What? I don't know. You don't know. She sounded terrified. She told me to meet her. Did you? Dad closed his eyes. No. Why? Because I thought she was overreacting. The words hit me hard. You didn't go? No. Then what happened? He looked at me. She called again about 20 minutes later. What did she say? She said, They're here. I froze. Who? I asked her. She wouldn't tell me. Dad's voice began shaking. Then the call ended. What happened after that? I drove to the house. And? She was already gone. The room became silent. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You've never told me this. I was trying to protect you. From what? The truth. I stood up. You don't get to decide that anymore. Dad looked at me. I know. Before I could say anything else, my phone buzzed. Another message. Now ask him about Helen. I stared at the screen. Dad saw it. His face went pale. What did Helen have to do with that night? Dad didn't answer. Dad, she came to the house. My heart stopped. Helen? He nodded. When? After your mother called me. Why? I don't know. Did you see her? Yes. And you never told me? I didn't know what to think. I stared at him. So Helen was there the night Mom died? Yes. Suddenly, everything felt different. Helen hadn't simply known about the trust. She had been there on the most important night of my mother's life. I picked up the flash drive. We're taking this to the authorities. Dad nodded, but before we could leave, we heard a noise outside. A car door, then footsteps. Dad immediately turned off the lights. We stood silently in the dark. The front door handle moved, once, twice, then stopped. Someone was outside. I could hear my own heartbeat. Dad quietly moved toward the back door. He whispered, "Stay behind me." The front door opened. A shadow appeared in the hallway. Then a voice called out, "Emma." I recognized it immediately. Helen. I couldn't believe it. Dad stepped forward. "What are you doing here?" Helen slowly entered the room. She looked calm, almost too calm. "I came to talk." "About what?" She looked at me. "About your mother." I held the flash drive tightly. "What do you know?" Helen sighed. "More than you think." "Did you work with Ryan?" She didn't answer. "Did you know about Lily's money?" Still nothing. "Did you know about the trust?" She finally looked at me. "Yes." My stomach tightened. "Did you tell Ryan about it?" "No." "Then who did?" She stared at me. "Your mother." I froze. "What?" She told me everything. "Why?" "Because she trusted me." I shook my head. "She wrote your name." Helen's expression changed. "Where?" "In a letter." For the first time, Helen looked afraid. "Then you found it." "Yes." She took a step toward me. "Emma, you don't understand." "Then explain." She looked at Dad. "Your father knows." Dad shook his head. "No, not everything." Helen sighed. "Your mother discovered that someone had been using the trust to move money." I frowned. "Who?" "I don't know." "You expect me to believe that?" "I was trying to help her." "Then why did you introduce Lily to Ryan?" Helen looked down. "I didn't know who he really was." "Why would you introduce them?" "Because I thought he could help her." I stared at her. "You knew Lily needed money." "Yes." "You knew about my savings." "Yes." "And you knew about the trust." "Yes." "Then how can you say you didn't know?" Helen's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was being watched, too. That stopped me." "By who?" She looked toward the door. "I can't say." "Why?" "Because if I do, Lily won't be safe." My heart dropped. What does Lily have to do with this? Helen reached into her bag. She pulled out a photograph. It showed Lily leaving the house the previous night. The same black sedan was visible behind her. Helen placed the photograph on the table. "They've been watching her for weeks." "Who?" "I don't know. You're lying." "No." She looked directly at me. "Emma, Ryan wasn't the person running the operation." I froze. "Then who was?" Helen hesitated. "The person behind him was someone who had access to your family's financial records." Dad stepped forward. "Daniel." Helen shook her head. "No." "Mark?" "No." I stared at her. "Then who?" Helen looked at Dad, then back at me, and finally said, "Someone inside your own home." My heart stopped. "What?" Helen's voice became quiet. Someone who knew exactly when you received money. Someone who knew when Lily needed tuition. Someone who knew about the trust. Someone who knew about my mother's fears. Someone who knew everything. I looked at Dad, then at the staircase. Lily wasn't home. My blood ran cold. Where is Lily? Helen's expression changed. I thought she was with you. I immediately called her. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Then my phone received a photograph. Lily was sitting inside a car. Underneath it was a message. You were looking in the wrong direction. Then another. Ask the person standing beside you. I slowly looked at Dad. He was staring at the photograph. And I realized something. The message wasn't accusing Dad. It was telling me to look at someone else. Someone who was standing beside him. I turned. Helen was gone. The front door was open, and on the floor was a small piece of paper. I picked it up. There were only 4 words. Trust no one tonight. I looked at Dad, then at the empty doorway. And for the first time, I understood the real danger. We weren't chasing them anymore. They were watching us. I stood frozen in the middle of the room. Lily was missing. Helen had disappeared, and someone had just sent me a photograph proving they knew exactly where Lily was. Dad tried calling her again. Nothing. Emma, we need to think. I looked at him. No, we need to act. I showed him the photograph. Look at the background. He studied it. There was a brick wall behind Lily, a narrow window, and a faded sign reflected in the glass. I zoomed in. Only 3 letters were visible. R.I.V. Dad suddenly looked at me. I know that place. Where? An old warehouse district near the river. We contacted the authorities immediately, but before they arrived, another message appeared. Come to the warehouse alone. I stared at it. Then another message. Bring the flash drive. Dad shook his head. They want you there because they know you'll come. I know. Then don't. I looked at Lily's photograph. I have to. We'll go with the authorities. I nodded. This time I wasn't going to make the same mistake. When we reached the warehouse district, several officers stayed nearby. The building was old and mostly empty. We entered carefully. At the end of a long hallway, we heard a voice. Emma. I stopped. It was Ryan. He stepped out from behind a doorway. He looked nothing like the confident investor Lily had described. He looked nervous, exhausted, and scared. Where's my sister? He raised his hands. I didn't hurt her. Where is she? She left. I stared at him. What? She figured it out. Figured what out? That I wasn't the person running everything. I stepped closer. Then who is? Ryan looked at Dad, then at me. I can't tell you here. Why? Because they know I'm talking to you. I looked around. Who? He swallowed. Your mother's friend. Helen? He nodded. She recruited me. My heart dropped. So you did work with her? Yes. Why? Money. Where is Lily? She escaped. I didn't believe him. Show me. He pointed toward a side door. She was held there. We rushed inside. The room was empty, but Lily's phone was lying on the floor. I picked it up. There was one unsent message. It said, Emma, don't trust Dad. I turned around. Dad was standing in the doorway. His face was pale. What does it say? I didn't answer. Ryan looked at Dad, then immediately stepped backward. That's him. My heart stopped. Who? Ryan pointed at Dad. He's the one who gave Helen the information. Dad stared at him. That's a lie. Ryan shook his head. No. He looked at me. Your father knew about the trust. I know. He knew about the money. Yes. He knew when your mother changed the documents. Dad shouted, Enough! Ryan flinched. Then he said, He also knew where the original records were. I looked at Dad. Is that true? Dad didn't answer. Dad! He lowered his head. I knew about the records. My stomach tightened, but I never gave them to Helen. Ryan shook his head. You didn't have to. What does that mean? I asked. Ryan looked at me. She already had them. I froze. From where? Ryan pointed toward the door. Your mother's old office. Daniel Reeves's office. Suddenly everything connected. Helen didn't need Dad to give her the records. She had access through Daniel. But then why had Ryan accused Dad? I looked at him. You're lying. Ryan shook his head. No, then prove it. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a copy of an email. The sender was Dad. The recipient was Helen. The email was dated 6 months earlier. It said, "The trust becomes active when Emma turns 25. After that, she will have access to everything." I looked at Dad. He looked devastated. I wrote that. My heart dropped. Why? Because Helen asked me. Why would she ask you? I thought she was helping your mother. I stared at him. You knew she was involved? I knew she was investigating the trust. That's not what I asked. Dad's eyes filled with tears. I trusted her. I shook my head. So did Mom. Suddenly Ryan's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. His expression changed. They know I'm here. Who? He showed me the message. You have 5 minutes. Then the building lights went out. Everyone froze. For a few seconds there was complete darkness. Then we heard footsteps. Several people running down the hallway. The officers moved immediately. I grabbed Dad's hand. Stay with me. We moved toward the exit, and then I heard a familiar voice. Helen. Emma. I turned. She was standing at the end of the hallway. She wasn't running. She was holding something. A folder. She looked at me. Your mother wanted you to have the truth. I shouted, Then tell me. Helen slowly opened the folder. Your mother didn't create the trust to protect the house. She paused. She created it to protect you. I stared at her. From what? Helen looked at Dad. From him. Dad went completely still. Helen continued. Your mother discovered that your father had been hiding debts. I looked at Dad. He whispered, It's not what you think. Helen pulled out another document. Your father wasn't stealing from your mother. She looked at me. He was trying to cover the debts so nobody would know. I stared at Dad. Then why did Mom fear you? Helen shook her head. She didn't fear me. She looked at the folder. She feared what I had discovered. What? Helen's voice dropped. Your mother's trust contained more than the house. She pulled out one final document. It contained a second account. My heart stopped. How much? Helen looked at me. Enough to change everything. She placed the document on the table. The amount was far larger than anything I had ever imagined. But there was something written beneath it. A beneficiary name. Emma Carter. I stared at it. Then I looked at Helen. Why did you steal Lily's money? Helen's expression changed. I didn't. Then who did? She slowly pointed toward the doorway. I turned, and there stood the one person I never expected to see. Lily, alive, unharmed, and holding a phone. She looked directly at me. Emma. I ran toward her, but before I could reach her, she said something that stopped me. I know who took the money. I stared at her. Who? She looked at Dad, then at Helen, then back at me, and whispered, It wasn't Ryan. It wasn't Helen. And it wasn't Dad. She held up the phone. I found the real account. My heart pounded. Whose? Lily looked at me, then said the name, and suddenly every piece of the puzzle fell into place. Lily looked at me. Then she slowly turned her phone toward me. I read the account name, and for a few seconds, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. The account belonged to Daniel Reeves, my mother's former attorney, the same man whose name appeared on the property documents, the same man connected to the trust, the same man whose office had been involved in the mysterious paperwork. I looked at Lily. How did you find this? She swallowed. Ryan told me where to look. I looked at Ryan. He nodded. I knew Daniel was behind the accounts, but I didn't know how deep it went. Helen stepped forward. Daniel created the investment scheme. I stared at her. You knew? I suspected. Then why didn't you stop him? Helen looked down. Because by the time I understood what was happening, I was already trapped. Dad stepped forward. What does Daniel want? Helen looked at me. The trust. I frowned. But the house? That's only part of it. She opened the folder. Your mother discovered that Daniel had been using confidential family information to create unauthorized financial accounts. I looked at the documents. The money Lily sent wasn't going into a real investment, Helen said. It was being moved through several accounts before eventually reaching Daniel. My hands tightened. So Lily's $12,000 was never lost, Helen said. It was stolen. I looked at Lily. She started crying. I thought I ruined everything. I pulled her into a hug. You made a terrible mistake. She nodded. I know. But you're not the person who planned this. She cried harder. For the first time in months, I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at the people who had deliberately used her. Then Dad spoke. What about the second account? Helen looked at me. That's why Daniel needed the trust activated. I looked at the document. The account contained money my mother had protected for years. Money she had intended for me. But there was another condition. I read it carefully. The account couldn't be accessed unless the original trust documents were verified. That's why they needed the original records. That's why someone had been trying to get me to go to the house. That's why the fake property transfer had been created. They weren't trying to steal the house. They were trying to gain access to everything connected to it. I looked at Helen. Why did you help us? She looked at the photograph of my mother. Because I promised her. She explained that after my mother's suspicions grew, she secretly asked Helen to keep an eye on Daniel. Helen had discovered that Daniel was working with several people, including Ryan, but she couldn't expose him immediately. She needed proof. And then my mother died. Helen had spent years trying to collect that proof without putting me in danger, but Daniel eventually discovered what she was doing. So Helen played along. She pretended to help him. She introduced Ryan to Lily because she believed Ryan could secretly provide information about Daniel. But the plan went wrong when Lily transferred the tuition money. Ryan couldn't stop the transaction without exposing himself, and Daniel realized that Lily could lead us back to him. I looked at Ryan. So you were working against Daniel? He nodded, eventually. Why didn't you tell Lily? I was scared. I understood, not completely, but enough. Then one final question remained. Where is Daniel? Nobody answered, until my phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number. I answered. Hello. Daniel's voice came through. You've caused quite a mess. I stared at the others. You stole my sister's money. No. You created the accounts. I managed accounts. You forged my father's signature. Silence. Then he said, You don't understand how your mother set all of this up. Then explain it. She left you a fortune without realizing what it would become. I looked at the documents. My mother knew exactly what she was doing. Daniel laughed softly. She knew enough to be dangerous. I felt my anger rising. You're finished. Am I? I looked at the officers standing nearby. You're already being recorded. There was silence. Then Daniel said, You think that matters? It will. Another pause. Then he said something unexpected. Ask your father why he never told you about the hospital. I looked at Dad. He went pale. What hospital? Daniel laughed. Goodbye, Emma. The call ended. I turned toward Dad. What hospital? He didn't answer. But before I could ask again, one of the officers approached. We traced the call. Where? They gave us an address. Daniel's office. He was still there. The officers left immediately. Hours later, we received the news. Daniel had been arrested. The accounts were frozen. The financial records were recovered. And most importantly, Lily's missing money was located. Not all of it had been recovered immediately, but the investigation had finally found the trail. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But I still had one question. The hospital. Dad finally told me the truth. The night Mom died, she had been taken to the hospital before he arrived. She had been conscious for a short time, and she had asked him to promise something, to keep me away from the investigation, to let me grow up without knowing how complicated everything had become. Dad had kept that promise, maybe too well. I looked at him. Mom wasn't trying to hide the truth from me forever. No. She was trying to give me a normal childhood. Yes. I looked at the photograph one last time. For years, I thought my mother had left me nothing but memories. I was wrong. She had left me protection. She had left me answers. And she had left me the chance to choose what kind of person I wanted to become. Months later, Lily returned to school. She worked part-time and slowly rebuilt the money she had lost. I never again gave her access to my savings without asking questions. But I didn't abandon her, because family isn't about pretending someone never makes mistakes. It's about helping them become better after they do. As for the money, I had saved for her tuition. Most of it was eventually recovered. But I didn't use it the way I originally planned. I created a proper education fund for Lily, with safeguards that neither of us could access alone. And the house, I kept it, not because it was valuable, but because it was the last place my mother had left her truth. Sometimes I still visit. I sit in the old study, I look at the painting, and I remember the words she left for me. Don't trust the story people tell you. Find the truth yourself. For a long time, I thought the hardest part of this story was losing $12,000. It wasn't. The hardest part was discovering how easily trust can be manipulated. And the strangest part, the person I thought had betrayed me, my sister, was actually the person who helped me uncover the truth. She made a terrible mistake, but she also found the final piece of the puzzle, and that's what changed everything. Because sometimes, the person who causes the biggest problem in your life can unexpectedly become the reason you finally discover the truth.